After years of militant social distancing, Vladimir Putin recasts himself as a man of the people during a visit to the southern Russian city of Derbent. People in the crowd beg just one picture, while Russian state TV cameras conveniently capture Wednesday's spectacle. An attempt perhaps to project unity and the perception of popular support. A mantle his former caterer turned mutineer Yevgeny Prigozhin now lays claim to. He's now reportedly in exile in Belarus after calling off his Wagner mercenaries' insurrection a mere 200 kilometers from Moscow. Not content with a walkabout alone, Putin also appeared at a conference in Moscow entitled Strong Ideas for the New Time. The message, the weekend hasn't left him weakened. Behind the scenes, his strongman credentials are being reasserted.
Я обращаюсь к руководству, командирам и бойцам.
The Kremlin declined questions about the whereabouts and condition of General Sergei Surovikin, the deputy commander of Russian forces in Ukraine. Amid unconfirmed reports, he's been detained. US media suggests he was given advance warning of Prigozhin's march on Moscow. In Ukraine, all is going according to plan, Russia's Ministry of Defense tries to tell its commander-in-chief, claiming huge Ukrainian losses on the Eastern Front. Under Putin's rule, Russia's savage missile strike on a crowded pizzeria in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk is recast. It killed at least 12 people, including 3 children. But Russia says its armed forces killed 2 Ukrainian generals and up to 50 of their officers. But footage like this, a Russian military plane shot down by the Wagner rebels during their short-lived rebellion, cannot be bombed into oblivion. That's been the message from Western leaders over the past 48 hours.
If you take a step back, it is genuinely extraordinary that we've gone from a place where we were 16 months ago, where you had Russian forces on the outskirts of Kyiv. They thought they would take the city in a matter of days. They thought they would erase Ukraine from the map as an independent country, to a place where we were this weekend, where you had forces moving on Russia's capital, Moscow, mercenaries of Putin's own making.
The West's reply to Putin: the mutiny was televised, Russia's rifts laid bare for the world to see. Well, earlier I spoke to the Russian chess grandmaster and human rights campaigner Garry Kasparov. He is a long-term critic of Vladimir Putin and had been speaking at the annual conference of the International Relations Institute, Chatham House. I started by asking him what he thinks will happen to Yevgeny Prigozhin.
What we know, again, is that Prigozhin was very close to Putin. Don't forget, Prigozhin was his chef, somebody who served food to Putin. And knowing Putin's paranoia, it shows absolute trust. So they worked together for many years. So Putin's confidant, a man who was allowed to do so many things, from troll factories to the private army that was funded by the state. And he rose against Putin, and then they ended up in some sort of negotiations, and Putin will run away from the capital knowing that it was indefensible because so many military units either decided not to fight Prigozhin or even join him. So again, I think that what we saw was the first act, maybe second act of this drama, or first chapter, second chapter of the book. There's more to come.
So do you think Putin lashes out in response? We've seen what's happened in Kramatorsk. Does he go one step further and launch battlefield nuclear weapons, for example?
I don't think so. I think it's what we actually learned from this short-lived mutiny is that nobody wants to die for Putin. So even the soldiers or lieutenants, captains, and speaking about nukes, that means that the generals and admirals will have to put their lives at stake because there's a great probability that Americans could respond, and that means that any installation that had been used to launch nuclear attack, tactical nukes, might be targeted by tomahawks. They're loyal to Putin because of the benefits. This concept of loyalty doesn't include dying for Putin, and that's what we saw. That's why I think now we should not totally ignore it, but I think all this talks about escalation, they're actually, helping Putin to regain confidence.
How confident are you that Russian people really know what is going on in Ukraine? And do you think there's still majority support in Russia? What do your conversations with people there tell you?
Look, you cannot have an open conversation with people in Russia. I still think there's a considerable support for the war, but we're not talking about 50%. It's much less. I think majority just is trying to adjust. There's a very small minority that against the war on moral grounds, but I think people will be happy to see the end of that. So of course they would like to win, but if there's any kind of a deal that is on the table, they might be very happy to accept it. And I guess that's the Prigozhin's revolt was a very much demonstration of the process. It's like something that is just underwater. We don't know it, but I think the volcano is ready to erupt.
What more would you like the West to do in response to what happened? They've responded quite cautiously, Western leaders, to the mutiny.
Yeah, I think the West owes Ukrainians a clear statement about the end of this war. Ukraine must win. Not ambiguous, we stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. Ukraine must win, and the win must include liberation of Ukrainian territories all the way down to Sevastopol, reparations, and also justice. War criminals must be brought to justice. This is the way to force the split among Russian elite. And if Prigozhin revolt shows us that the split was there, so make it deeper.
We've talked a lot about speculation. I want to get you to speculate again. How long do you think Putin has got in power now?
I think the war will be over next year with Ukrainian victory, but I still hope that Ukrainian, even partial Ukrainian success may lead to the collapse of Russian defense lines. I think there's a 20% chance we may see the collapse of Russian front line later this year, and I don't think that Putin can survive long after the Ukrainian flag is raised in Sevastopol.
So you think it's a fair bet that Putin will be gone within a year?
Yes, I think it depends, of course, on many factors. But the free world is now willing to play hardball, supporting Ukraine. Again, it's not about regime change. You don't have to say anything about Russia, but making sure Ukraine is liberated. I think that the end of this war with Ukrainian triumph means that not 5,000, not 25,000, but 250,000 or more of Russian soldiers will come back to Russia. I don't think they will be very happy to see Putin around.
Garry Kasparov, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.